Hey everybody, Asher here with a One Night in Karazhan preview. Today we are looking at the 5 worst cards revealed in One Night in Karazhan. This is recorded after all 45 cards in the set have been revealed, and there are some good cards to be sure, and we'll talk about them later, but today we're going to look at the stinkers. Why does that matter? Because it gives us kind of it gives us a lot of discussion points to talk about maybe Hearthstone from a design standpoint, but I think this is a video where I know typically in these kind of lists you're supposed to make a slow build, but today we're going to start with the worst card in the whole set, and that is Purify for Priest. Already a meme of a card itself, 2 mana, silence a friendly minion, draw a card. Now, there's a lot of issues with this card. First off, a lot of people were mad because it was one of the last Priest cards revealed, and it is not what Priest needs at all. But then you look at it from a construction standpoint as well, and Blizzard had previously kind of ticked up the cost of silence, and as a result you have maybe a card that's a worse power word shield because it costs 2 mana, and you can only use it on friendly minions, which means you can't even use it if you don't have anything else on the board. Now, I did hear a developer in the reveal stream say, hey, well, you can combo it with like Ancient Watcher or something, but that's a niche in of itself, and you don't really want to be paying 2 mana for that. I think the days of Watcher Priest are probably gone, but what's a little bit more troublesome, I guess, to a point, is I did hear the developer that was there slip in a few times something that I've heard if you've been following World of Warcraft, which is the class fantasy idea, and I think that's kind of mixing the pools a little bit. I don't know if the class fantasy of Priest is just a suck, it really shouldn't be, but there are some questions just in terms of the identity of classes. What is Priest? It's a class that heals? Okay. It's a class that reacts? Okay. But Purify doesn't really fall into any of that. You're fundamentally making a minion worse pretty much always, and you're drawing a card. And I think what it boils down to is that this is just crap. And it's a common, so you don't even get that much dust for it. And we can go a little bit later on for what Priest might need in the long run, but Purify is not it. And it's not just hype or anything. This is legitimately a horrible card. And remember, the other 4 cards that are on this list, not as bad as Purify. Some of them come a little close, but not as bad. Next on the list is Ivory Night, one of the first cards that was actually revealed. I don't know if Paladin's class fantasy is to be a chess piece unicorn, but the problem with this card is manifold. It's 6 mana, 4/4, so it's already overcosted. Discover's a really good mechanic, but the heal that goes with that Discover can only be on your hero. You can't actually target it. So Cold Apothecary already doesn't really see much play except for in Reno decks, and the hero self-healing, Paladin kind of does already have that covered. So what you're kind of hanging your hat on with this card is the Discover mechanic. And when you look at the whole list of Paladin cards, a lot of them are very situational, a lot of them are very reactionary, and on top of the fact that over half of them cost 2 mana or less, that heal that's going to go to you likely won't really work too well. But then the other problem with this card is, let's compare it to Raven Idol, which will let you discover a spell, and it's only Druid spells. That's how we know this will be only Paladin spells. Druid has a lot of direct damage spells. Paladin does not. Paladin has a lot of buffs that you need to throw on minions, and you may actually get a choice between 3 cards that you just absolutely can't use by the turn you can play them because you have nothing on the board, and that stings bad. Now, there's going to be those times where you get like a Lay on Hands or an Avenging Wrath or Enter the Coliseum or things that you may really need, and that's why I really like the Discover mechanic. But this card's way too inconsistent, especially to be 6 mana. I mean, are you going to put this in a slot that's already pretty contested between Cairn, between Sylvanas, between any other number of 6-drops if you're trying to do like a Dragon Paladin or something? So no, Ivory Knight's just bad. It's overcosted, and the payoff, it's one of those things that it sells it first like, ooh, discover and heal yourself. But remember, Paladin's like mostly secrets and buffs. Not good. Next on the list, remember, these are in no particular order except for Purify, which I just want to mention again is terrible. Next on the list is Moat Lurker, a card that looks very, very, very gimmicky. Once again, you can see the 6 mana slots are not my favorite, but 6 mana 3/3 is terrible. 6 mana 3/3 with Destroy a Minion, possibly okay. Death Rattle, resummon it. Now, there is the obvious thing of just trying to get around minions, maybe fighting for lethal, but those board states can come up so rarely that maybe you want to have a hard removal that your class has instead of relying on a 6-mana minion that could be a dead draw. As for doubling up on, like, N'Zoth Death Rattles, I almost said Battle Cries, doubling up on Death Rattles also doesn't work very well there, if only because you don't really need to summon that many things with N'Zoth to get value, and this card is just so very slow that you typically are going to want to use it on your opponent's cards instead of your own cards, but they come back, unless, I guess, you silence Emote Lurker, but no, this is just a over-costed card for an effect where maybe if it costs like 2 or 3, and you could play it the same turn as, like, oh, you want to activate your Sylvanas now, it could work. You combo it with Therissian. That's about the only way I can see this card being played, but I think it's too slow and it costs too much. Next on this list is Silvermoon Portal. Now, some of the Portal cards are pretty good, some of the Portal cards are kind of meh, but I had to pin Silvermoon Portal as kind of being underwhelming on both fronts. You'd only want to play like a buff card like this and something like an aggro trying to swarm the board Paladin. And for that one, Blessing of Kings can be really good because you can turn your hero power token into a 5/5 menace that's very tough to deal with. 2/2 still lets you trade up, but typically not nearly as much. And we have another 4-minion thing that can do that already, Keeper of Uldaman, which there's one thing if you really want to pay attention to this card, it's 4 mana. That is a very contested slot in Paladin, whether it's standard or wild. So you have to ask yourself, A, do you really need a +2/+2? And B, do you really need to cut something else to possibly make it work or stack your curve way too hard? Let's remember as well that, and I note that I haven't talked too much about summoning a 2-cost minion. 2-cost minions, they don't really affect too much of the game. Yeah, you may sometimes get a Totem Golem. Yeah, you may sometimes get a Doomsayer that's very untimely. But at the end of the day here, you got to look at, like, the buff itself is not really good enough. And I think I'd rather play a 4-cost minion or Blessing of Kings. That's kind of the bottom line. So this card doesn't really have a place in Paladin right now. So it's bad. Some of the other portals are bad. I've debated putting the Warrior portal on here, but once some cards cycle out, it could see some play. So we'll keep that in mind. Morose is the final one, and you may have gotten the tone of this from my previous sort of looking at cards in the game video here. Morose is just awful in a lot of ways. Now, when I first saw the card, I didn't see it had stealth, which I thought it was even worse. But even with stealth, there's already 3 mana minions with 1 health with stealth that don't get played because there's so many board clears, there's so much ping damage in the game. Even between Knife Juggler, Flame Waker, Ravaging Ghoul, I don't think that's the right one, but any of the Whirlwind effects that are out there, any of the board clears that are people playing, even the new Shaman Portal, if that gets traction, I'm not sure if it will, but if it does, Morose is just not going to stick around. The card art's cool, the Steward art that it summons is cool. The fight in Karazhan is one of my favorites from back when I was raiding. Just very disappointing card here, because even then, you're paying 3 mana for a 1/1. That summons 1/1s. It's super slow. Again, too slow for the state of the game as it's going to be for standard for quite some time. And it's a neutral, so maybe someone can try and mash it and make it work, but I think 3 mana is just too much for this, so it's just garbage. Well, I mean, it's not garbage, it's 400 dust, so it has that over Purify. So what do we go, our takeaway from this? Like I said, that's 5 cards that I think are the worst in One Night in Karazhan, and I think it's valuable just to go over one more time. Why do we go over the cards that are the worst here? I mean, it's an adventure. If you're going to get the set, you're going to get these cards regardless. And I know some of these are janky. You could try and make them work in a deck. That's fine, but you may want to clue into them going forward as just like, don't plan on these cards necessarily working out later on. I mean, Blizzard, if you're trying to make Silence Priest happen, it's not going to happen. Wailing Ghoul, no, that's not what it's called, but the Silence all the minions on your side of the board is already out and wild. So if Blizzard keeps trying to talk about class fantasy and thing like that and Hearthstone and a card game, that's not going to work either. But pretty much all these cards, what they have in common And some themes that you want to look for when you're analyzing cards is not just, okay, is the effect cool? Okay, is the stat line good? It's how is it going to fit into a deck that you're actually going to make? And sometimes the fundamental question is, hey, I have too many 3-drops. Hey, I have too many 2-drops. I have too many 4-drops. What kind of deck is this? And, I mean, what it boils down to is, even though there is some playtesting you'll have to do once the set comes out, eventually you'll know, okay, some cards are above the cut, some cards are below the cut. And next time, we're going to go over the cards that I think are the best, and then I'm going to go over kind of another class evaluation as a whole, just to once again try and pin myself to something before One Night in Karazhan goes live. Though keep in mind, these cards are going to be trickled out week to week, so there's going to be some shifts in the metagame before the whole set's released. So maybe you can take advantage of that, but once again, not with Purify. Trash card. Shame on you, Blizzard. Shame, shame. This is Asher. Thanks for watching. See you next time.